Vivid verses.
The dinner plates were still warm when Cassandra told me. She set her fork down with a particular kind of precision. Not a clatter, not a drop, just a deliberate placement that I'd learned over the years meant she'd been rehearsing something. She looked at the middle distance between us at the candle I'd lit because it was Tuesday and I still did things like that. And she said it the way someone reads a prepared statement. I've been thinking about this for a long time. I'm done with that part of our marriage. Permanently. I need you to respect that. I sat with it for a moment. She's been rehearsing. The phrasing is too clean. That part of our marriage, a euphemism so clinical it sounds like she practiced it in the car. I asked her, calmly, if she meant what I thought she meant. She confirmed it. She offered no medical reason, no suggestion of therapy, no door left ajar. Her eyes had a quality I recognized, the braced quality of someone waiting for an explosion, hoping for tears, prepared for volume. She'd scripted the argument, probably, had her responses queued up. I didn't give her the scene. Okay, I said. I hear you. She blinked. That's it. I'm processing it. I don't think I should say much right now. She seemed almost disappointed. I picked up my fork and finished the last of my food, which was good. She'd made a roasted chicken with preserved lemon that she'd been perfecting for months. I complimented it. She stared at me like I'd said something in a foreign language. What followed was a week of careful observation. I'm not someone who makes decisions in the heat of anything. That's not restraint. It's just how my mind works. I need to understand the full shape of a problem before I decide what to do about it. So I watched. I listened. I paid attention to the texture of the days that followed. She seemed relieved, mostly. There was a lightness to her that I hadn't seen in a while, which told me she'd been carrying this announcement for some time, that the weight had been the anticipation of my reaction rather than the decision itself. She was waiting, I think, for the negotiation, for the pleading, for the slow erosion of her position through persistence and pressure. I didn't do any of that. I wasn't built for it, and I didn't want to be. What she's actually said, stripped of the gentler language, is, I'm removing something from this agreement without your consent, and I expect you to remain bound by every other part of it. The question isn't how I feel about that. The question is what I'm going to do. I thought about it the way I think about any complex problem. I mapped the variables. I considered the options. Option 1, leave. Clean, honest, complete. But I wasn't ready to leave. Not yet, not like that. There were pieces of the life I'd built that I wasn't willing to discard without exhausting other possibilities first. Option 2, accept celibacy. She'd framed this as an actual choice, as though it were a dignified path for a man in his early 40s with a healthy constitution and no intention of becoming a monk. I gave this the consideration it deserved, which wasn't much. Option 3, find a discreet arrangement. Address what the marriage had stopped providing through a channel that didn't threaten the marriage's structure, didn't invite chaos into the house, didn't require anyone to be humiliated. A clean solution to a clean problem. I sat with option 3 for several days. I examined it from angles I didn't like. I acknowledged that most people would call it a betrayal, full stop, without nuance. I understood that. But here's where my thinking landed, and it landed there firmly. She had rewritten the terms of the agreement. She'd done it unilaterally, without discussion, without my consent, and she'd made it permanent. She'd offered me a take it or leave it. That wasn't a marriage. That was a hostage situation with good furniture. If she could change the terms, so could I. The difference, I decided, was that I would be doing it honestly in my own mind. I wasn't going to pretend this was something other than what it was. I was going to own the decision cleanly and live with its consequences if they came. I wasn't going to manufacture justifications or tell myself a story that made me the hero. I was going to see it clearly. She'd closed the door, I was going to find a window, and we would continue as before in all the ways that mattered. I started looking quietly. Her name was Ingrid. We met through a mutual acquaintance at a small professional gathering. 12 people in a colleague's back garden on a warm evening, the kind of event where conversations happen in the gaps between others, and you can be reasonably certain nobody is watching closely. She was direct in the way that people who don't need anything from you tend to be direct. She laughed at things that were actually funny. She didn't perform. I was honest with her from the beginning. Not brutally, not confessionally, but clearly. I told her I was married and intended to stay that way. I told her the nature of the situation. I told her what I was looking for and what I wasn't. She said, "Well, that's refreshingly straightforward," and we talked for another hour. She's not interested in complication. Neither am I. This might work. It worked. We saw each other infrequently, once every few weeks, sometimes less. It was not a love affair. It was not a replacement marriage running in parallel. It was a specific arrangement serving a specific function, and both of us understood what it was. Ingrid had her own life, her own priorities, her own reasons for preferring simplicity. There was genuine warmth between us, but no illusions. I was careful, not paranoid, not evasive, just careful in the way that someone who doesn't want to cause unnecessary pain is careful. I didn't become distant from Cassandra. I didn't let guilt, which I mostly didn't feel, and examine myself rigorously for curdle into coldness. I showed up at home the same way I always had. I cooked on the nights I cooked. I asked about her day and meant it. The marriage continued in its altered form, and I kept my half of the altered bargain. She seemed happy in a way that people seem happy when they've gotten something they wanted without having to pay for it. I observed this without bitterness. I made my peace. It lasted 11 months before she found out. I wasn't careless. I want to be clear about that. What happened was a piece of genuinely bad luck of the kind that makes you appreciate, in retrospect, that you can do everything right and still have a thread pulled by circumstance. Ingrid knew a woman named B. B and Cassandra had a loose but real connection through a book club that met monthly at a cafe near our house. Cassandra mentioned my name once in passing, apparently. We put things together. B, in the way of people who've decided their discomfort with information should be someone else's problem, said something. I found out that the chain existed about a day before Cassandra confronted me. I heard it through the same acquaintance who'd introduced me to Ingrid, who'd heard something and thought I should know. I sat with that extra day and used it. She knows. She's going to come at me, probably tonight, probably hard. The question is not whether this happens. It's happening. The question is what I'm going to do when it does. I didn't prepare a script. Scripts are for people who need the comfort of rehearsed words when their actual thinking fails them. I was going to think in real time, as I always did, and I was going to be honest, and I was not going to apologize for a logic I still believed in. She came to me after dinner. She'd barely eaten. I'd noticed, which told me she'd been sitting on it all day, had spent hours on the high voltage of anticipated confrontation. Her hands were composed, but her jaw was tight. She said, "I need to talk to you." Okay. She told me what she'd heard. She laid it out, the name, the approximate timeline, the general fact of it. She was controlled, which surprised me slightly. I'd expected more heat. She was running on something cooler than anger, which was more unsettling. "Is it true?" she asked. Yes. She absorbed that. How long? About 11 months. Another silence. She was looking at me like she was trying to find something in my face. Remorse, probably, or the crumpling quality of guilt, and not finding it. "I want to understand," she said, "how you thought this was acceptable. Here we are. This is the moment. Be precise. Don't be cruel, but be honest." I said, "Do you remember the night you told me you were done with that part of our marriage?" Her jaw tightened. I'm not arguing with you yet. I'm asking if you remember it." "Of course I remember it. What did you tell me to do if I didn't like it?" A longer silence. She knew where this was going. She was deciding whether to engage with the logic or try to route around it. I don't see what that has to do with. You said I could leave if I didn't like it. You said it wasn't negotiable. You made a permanent unilateral decision, and you presented it as a condition I could either accept or walk away from. I kept my voice level, not cold, not performative, just even. I didn't leave. I didn't try to change your mind. I respected your decision completely. And then I made my own. That is not the same thing. Tell me why. Because what I decided affected no one but us. What you did brought someone else into this marriage. Behind closed doors and with complete discretion. There was no bringing in. There was an arrangement that addressed something you decided was no longer your concern. She stood up. She was doing something with her hands, touching the back of the chair, then releasing it, then touching it again. Not quite pacing, not quite still. You're sitting there telling me you had an affair for almost a year and you're not even sorry. I'm telling you I made a decision using the same logic you used when you made yours. You decided something was off the table permanently and didn't ask whether that worked for me. I didn't ask either. I looked at her directly. If you don't like it, Cass, you know where the door is. Those were your words. She stared at me. There it is. The exact words coming back around. She recognizes them. She can hear the echo. The question is whether she can hear what they reveal about herself, or whether she's going to use them as a grievance instead. That's not fair, she said finally, and her voice had a different quality now, thinner, less composed. I know it doesn't feel fair, but fair in both directions is actually what I'm proposing. You knew I didn't know anything about what you meant. You said what you said. I took you seriously. I let that land before I continued. The thing is, Cass, if I come to you crying and begging and trying to negotiate, you would have held the line. You'd made that decision and you were certain about it. I respected that certainty. I found a way to work within the conditions you'd set without asking you to change anything. She sat down again, less controlled now, the careful management of her expression beginning to slip. I can't believe you're trying to make this my fault. I'm not. I'm trying to give you an accurate account of what happened. You're going to decide what it means. That's your right. My right. She laughed, and it had no humor in it. You keep talking about rights. You sound like you're closing a deal. She's frustrated that I'm being logical. She wants the emotional equivalent of broken crockery, something she can feel clear about, something she can point to as evidence that I lost control. I'm not going to give her that. I'm telling you what I did and why I did it. I'm not lying to you. I'm not minimizing it. I'm telling you I thought it through, I arrived at a position I could defend, and I lived by it. And you feel nothing. I didn't say that. She waited. I feel the particular kind of regret that comes from knowing we're here instead of somewhere better. I wish you'd want to talk about it. I wish you'd given me a conversation instead of an announcement. I would have handled things differently if you had. So, this is still somehow about me. It's about both of us. It was always about both of us. You just decided it wasn't. She was quiet for a long time. Outside, a neighbor's car pulled in and the headlights swept briefly across the ceiling. I watched her face. She wasn't crying, which I respected. She was thinking, which I respected more. What do you want to happen now? She asked. Good question. Real question. She's past the argument and into the actual territory. I want to know what you want, I said, because I've been working with the rules you set. If you want different rules, we should talk about them. Actually talk. Not announcements, not ultimatums. A conversation. You're asking me to renegotiate after you've already done what you did. You renegotiated first. We're already in the renegotiation. This is what it looks like. She pressed the heel of her hand against her forehead, briefly, then lowered it. I need some time to think. Of course. Take what you need. I got up, took the glasses from the table, rinsed them at the sink. I heard her chair shift, heard her footsteps go upstairs. I stood at the kitchen window for a while after she'd gone, looking at the garden, dark now, the shapes of things visible but not their colors. I didn't feel victorious. I want to be clear about that. There's no prize for being right in a marriage. There's only the question of what's true and what you're both willing to do about it. I went upstairs eventually and slept on my side of the bed. She was either asleep or pretending to be. I didn't test it. We didn't speak about it for 3 days. That wasn't avoidance on my part. She was the one setting the pace, and I was giving her the space she'd asked for. I went to work, came home, cooked, left food in the pan for her. She ate it, which I took as a small signal. We passed each other in the corridor, said the things that needed saying. It was not hostile. It was a weather pattern, pressure, and accumulation, and I waited for it to break. On the 3rd day, she knocked on the door of the small room I used as a home office. I was doing something on the computer that didn't need doing urgently. I turned around. She sat in the chair across from the desk. She thought about this, I could tell. Not the emotional version of thought, but the actual kind, the kind where you sit somewhere quiet and try to see something clearly even when it's uncomfortable. I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. I will. Did you think about leaving? Before you did what you did it cross your mind as an option? Yes. Leaving was the first option I considered. Something moved across her face that I couldn't fully read. And you decided not to. I decided not to. At least not then. Not until I understood more about what we were. And what did you decide we were? I thought about how to answer that honestly without being harsh. I decided we were something worth attempting to preserve, if it was possible to do that without either of us having to surrender entirely. And you told me very clearly that you had no interest in surrendering your position. So I found a way to work within it. By going outside the marriage. By finding a workaround, yes. I'm not going to dress it up. She looked at her hands. The person, Ingrid. Is it over? It is, as of about 48 hours ago. She looked up at that. I could see her recalibrating. She'd expected me to say it was already over, long over, to offer that as mitigation. The 48 hours changed the math. You ended it when you found out I knew. I ended it because the situation that created the need for it is apparently no longer fixed. If we're having a conversation, a real one, then the premise has changed. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said something that surprised me. You were waiting for a conversation. I was waiting for a conversation. I didn't think you wanted one. After I told you, you just accepted it. I thought you didn't care. Interesting. She read my composure as indifference. She thought the absence of argument meant the absence of feeling. I cared, I said. I just didn't think pleading was going to get me anywhere. You'd made up your mind. I could hear it. You could have said something. I said everything I had to say the next day. You didn't hear me, or you heard me and decided it didn't change anything. Either way, the answer was no. She nodded slowly, not in agreement, exactly, but in the way of someone confirming the shape of something they've been mapping in the dark. So, where does that leave us? She asked. Where do you want to leave us? I'm asking you. I know, but your wanting matters here. You're the one who drew the lines. I'm not interested in imposing on you. I never was. I'm interested in what's actually available, if anything is. She looked at me for a long time. The evening was getting dark outside the small window. I hadn't turned the office light on. We were sitting in the last of the daylight, that flat gray quality of 5 o'clock in autumn, where everything looks like it's being described from memory. I need to think about why I made that decision, she said. I think I had reasons that I told myself were permanent when they might not be. That would be worth thinking about. I'm not promising anything. I'm not asking you to. She stood up, and for a moment she just stood there, not leaving, not saying anything, her hand resting on the back of the chair. Then she said, I'm going to make some tea. Do you want some? It was the least dramatic thing she could have offered. It was exactly right. Yes, I said. Thank you. I turned back to the desk for a few minutes, not actually doing anything, just giving her time to move to the kitchen. Then I shut the computer off and went to join her. What followed was not a sudden repair. I want to be honest about that because the temptation, looking back from this vantage point, is to tidy things into a resolution, a moment where the music changed and we understood each other perfectly and moved forward in harmony. That's not what happened. What happened was slower and less comfortable. There were conversations that went badly, that hit walls and had to be abandoned and returned to. There were evenings where the silence had the wrong texture, and we both noticed, and neither of us knew what to do about it. There was a session with a therapist that she suggested and I agreed to, in which a professionally calm woman helped us both understand that the problem predated the announcement by years, that the announcement was a symptom rather than the disease, and that I had been treating the symptom instead of asking about the underlying condition. I held that observation and examined it carefully. She's right. I made a calculated, rational decision, and it was correct on its own terms, but it was also an avoidance, a way of addressing a surface problem without confronting the deeper question of whether Cassandra and I were still seeing each other at all. That was the harder reckoning, and it took longer to arrive at. There was a specific evening, a month or so after the initial confrontation, when we were sitting at the kitchen table late, the kind of late where the house has its own quality, all its small sounds audible, and Cassandra said something she'd apparently been trying to say for a while. I made that announcement because I felt invisible, she said. That's not an excuse. I'm not saying what you did was wrong. I'm saying that's what was underneath it for me. I didn't know how to say I felt invisible, so I said something permanent instead. I listened to that fully before I responded. I made you invisible by not asking, I said. I thought not pushing was the same as giving you space. I think I was wrong about that. She looked at me with something that was close to relief. Not the relief of someone who's been exonerated, but the relief of someone who's finally been correctly described. I didn't ask you how you were doing, I said. For a long time. I just assumed. I didn't tell you. No, but I should have asked. We sat with that. The kitchen clock made its small movements. Outside, it was raining, a light rain, the kind that you hear more than feel. I'm asking now, I said. How are you doing? Actually, she laughed softly, which was the right response. There was something absurd and also necessary about the formality of it, about having to go back to the beginning and establish the question. Honestly, I'm scared, she said. I'm scared that we can't come back from it. I'm scared that even if we try, I'll always know what happened, and it'll be like this thing we're carrying. That might be true, I said. I'm not going to promise it isn't. Some things change the shape of something permanently. Does that bother you? Does it? Be honest. Yes, I said. I'd rather be in a version of this marriage where that thing didn't happen. I can't change the fact that it did. Why did you stay? In general, before all of this. You could have left a long time ago. I thought about that carefully, because I still believed there was something real here, even when it was frustrating, even when I felt like you'd stopped seeing me. And now I'm less certain, but I'm still here. I met her eyes. The question is whether you want to figure it out or whether you want a clean break. Both are legitimate. I'll support either. She picked up her mug, put it down again. I don't want a clean break. Then we figure it out. It's going to be messy. Yes, I said. It usually is. The conversation I want to end on is not the confrontation. It's not the moment when I quoted her own words back at her, though I'll admit there was a precision to that moment that felt, briefly, like clarity. The conversation I want to end on is a smaller one. About 6 weeks after everything broke open, I came home to find her in the back garden, sitting in one of the chairs we'd bought the summer before, a glass of wine on the table beside her. She'd moved the chairs to face the back fence, where she'd planted something last spring. I couldn't tell you what, exactly, but she'd been tending it with patience, and it had come up unexpectedly well. She was just looking at it. I changed out of my work clothes and came outside with my own glass and sat in the other chair. We sat there for a while without saying anything. The evening was good, cool enough to be comfortable, light still holding. The plants along the fence were doing their quiet, inarticulate thing. "You know what I was thinking about?" she said eventually. "Tell me. The first apartment we had. The one with the radiator that made that noise. God, that noise. I used to be able to sleep through anything in that apartment," she said. "I don't know why. I thought about it. The particular quality of those early years, when the future was still mostly hypothetical and the problems were all small enough to be funny. We were younger," I said. "Everything was louder, and we didn't mind. I miss that sometimes. The not minding." "Me too." She reached over and picked up her wine. She didn't say anything else for a while, and neither did I. The light continued to change, doing what light does, and we sat in it. We're not finished with any of this. The work is still ahead, and some of it is going to be hard, and there's no certainty about how it ends. But we're both here, in the same garden, looking at the same thing. That's something. I picked up my glass. The evening held.
Thanks for listening.